Welcome to In the Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. I'm Mara, and this episode I'm talking with the renowned science fiction author of Exhalation, Stories of Your Life and Others, among many other notable science fiction works, Ted Chiang.
Thanks, Mara. Hi, I'm Ted Chiang, and I'll be visiting San Jose State very soon.
Yes, this is an intro before you begin our CLA event, which will be hosted at the Hammer Theater in downtown San Jose. And of course, we don't wish to spoil any of that. So we have just a few short questions to give to you to talk about. But we'll go ahead and begin with my first question, which is, you're very open about how long it takes for you to start crafting an idea to finishing a finalized manuscript, a finalized story. So as just an opener, a softball, if you will, could you briefly discuss this and perhaps share your process for crafting a narrative? What do the stages look like, the beginning stages? Take us through the process.
So for me, I am, I guess, reliant on inspiration. And what that looks like for me is that, in general, ideas for stories, they might come and then they might go pretty quickly. But if there's an idea which keeps coming back to me repeatedly over a period of months or sometimes years, that is when I sort of take notice, because then I start to think about it in a more deliberate fashion, because I figure like there must be something which there must be something about this idea which has a hold over me, because it keeps coming back. And so then I started looking at it in a more deliberate fashion, and I sort of turned the idea over in my head, and I guess I'm mostly looking at what, if any, philosophical question is illuminated by this idea. Because I think that is probably what is drawing me toward it. And then I might sort of start playing out different possible story scenarios and seeing, which ones I think best illuminate, a philosophical question, and do they lead in a direction that I find productive? Do they do they lead to a position that I actually agree with? And eventually, if I find a story scenario that I think leads to a good conclusion, that leads to a good ending, then I guess I'm ready to start writing it as a story. And usually, so during this process, I'm not writing anything that I expect to appear in the story. I'm just making a lot of notes about what I'm thinking. But usually the first thing that I write that I expect will appear in the story is the ending. There's usually like a paragraph or a few sentences that I'll write down, which to me marks the destination of the story. And once I have that down, then I can start constructing the rest of the story with that endpoint in mind.
Do you find that the ending remains rather intact by the time you get there through writing the rest of the story, or do you find that it ends up being a bit malleable and you have to change it a little bit?
I mean, it might change a little bit,
Okay.
but not a lot because, like I said, that's uh, that is where I'm trying to get to. So usually, a lot of other things about the story are more malleable, um, because I'm the process of writing the story itself is a process of figuring out how can I best get to this ending, and I might wind up changing things that will get me there better. But yeah, the destination doesn't change.
Which is really interesting, given that I know many writers have different points of view, of course, or processes. Some writers start off with the, I have a concept, I'll run with it, explore, 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 and then eventually figure out how it ends. And you have a much more, I would say, like end goal focused, of course, approach. And I think once you even told me way back when you were my instructor in Clarion, for the listeners out there, uh, that you tend to choose your protagonists based on who would be most affected by whatever concept that you seem to be playing around with. Does that still hold true?
Um, well, so I think we're probably talking about I think a reasonable strategy for a writer when trying to come up with uh, a story for the speculative
Mm.
scenario that they have envisioned is to ask the question, who is unhappy? And because when you
Yes.
identify who is unhappy in this speculative world, uh, you have a good candidate for a protagonist. Um, I think that is in general a, a a good strategy if you are trying to turn your speculative premise into a story.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to say that that is the procedure that I always use,
Okay.
but I think that it is uh, it's worth thinking about if you are if because I think a lot of people they find it easier to come up with a scenario like a general like sort of world building, but they don't really know how to find a character, a protagonist, and a plot. And I think that asking the question who is unhappy, that is a reasonable way to get from the world to a protagonist and a plot.
It's definitely a piece of like craft that I hold in my writer toolbox that has stuck with me for some time, obviously, because I still think about it. But that leads us into my second question, which talking more about speculative fiction as a genre. I know in the past you've discussed the differences between science fiction and fantasy. I know you kind of discussed about how science fiction tends to be a bit more impersonal. Technology is mass produced and then manufactured, and it can be operated by human beings who aren't particularly specialists with it. It's become a bit more for the masses, whereas in fantasy, the universe has a relationship with individual people, and then the speculative elements that exist in that narrative happen without any form of like scientific reasoning to bring it about. And it is just something that that like human specialists can like hone and maintain and have an innate relationship with. With this framework in mind, what do you think are the potential narratives for each of these genres, these subgenres, if you will? How would they differ and how do they intersect? I know, of course, it becomes much more blurred when people start looking and really picking at the lines between these genres of science fiction and fantasy.
So, uh, so just to sort of clarify, so when one of the things that I think characterizes science fiction is the idea that the universe is impersonal. The universe doesn't really distinguish between people. That the universe is a kind of machine. Um, and uh, you know, one of the things that this uh, one of the things that this leads to in terms of if you have a heroic protagonist, I think one way to formulate it is something that a friend of mine who writes young adult and middle grade uh, uh, describes makes this distinction as there are heroes who are special by birth and there are heroes who are special by deed.
Hmm.
And um, and I think this is one way to frame it that um, there are a lot of stories where your protagonist is a hero because of there's something special about them from the moment they were born, who their parents were, you know, or there was some prophecy that is being fulfilled, and uh, so they wind up in the role of hero uh, by virtue of uh, some intrinsic aspect to them uh, that maybe precedes them actually doing anything.
Hmm.
And sometimes this manifests as having special powers. Uh, and on the other side, you have protagonists who were not born special in any way. But they become heroes by virtue of the things that they do. And in young adult fiction, you could say that maybe you could say that Harry Potter is someone who is special by birth,
Hmm.
and Katniss Everdeen is someone who is special by deed. There's nothing special about Katniss Everdeen's parentage.
Yes.
Um, and And I think both of these are perfectly good kinds of stories. And I think the idea of being special by birth, that is a super appealing one.
Yes.
That resonates with readers of all ages, I think. Um, so I don't think that in the real world there's anyone who is special by birth.
I'm
In
sure
our
there's
world,
people in our government who would disagree with that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yes, of
yeah.
course.
Yes, but I think in our world, there's no one who is special by birth. People are only special by deed. You
Yes.
know, there was nothing, there was no prophecy about Martin Luther King Jr. His parents, were not anyone in particular. Um, who, whatever person you think of it as someone who was a hero, I'd say in the real world, yeah, it was not because of who their parents were. It was because of the things that they did. On the other hand, uh, in terms of what kind of stories are effective, what kind of stories resonate with readers, I think it is entirely possible that stories about protagonists who are special by birth can inspire people.
Uh-huh.
Um, uh, so it is uh, so yeah, the fact that our universe doesn't actually work in a way where there are certain people who are special by birth. I don't know that that necessarily means that we shouldn't be telling stories
Yes.
about heroes who are special by birth. Um, but I think I guess I feel like this is a distinction worth thinking about in terms of a writer should think about what are they saying with their story.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I think about I find myself talking a lot of the time in my with my cohort and my writing peers about like what I when I think of like Superman and like Paddington Bear, which funny enough are two characters who are like inherently like in their core good and characters who don't particularly change through a narrative, but through their specialness, they change all the other flawed characters around them and how that can still be something incredibly inspiring for people, even if it's not the most even if the special birth is a bit more and the special someone is more fantastical. But I definitely understand what you're saying. I think it resonates a lot. And then, but for my third question, I have So you recently won an award for the American Humanist Association. First of all, congratulations.
Thank
Fantastic
you.
on that. But I'm curious to know how you think humanist values could help society better face the upcoming challenges around AI influence. This is becoming a huge hot topic, especially amongst artists and writers who are the primary majority of our listeners, who are also writers and artists. So take it away.
So I guess we should probably just clarify what we mean when we say humanism.
Mhm.
And to me, humanism is the idea that uh, you know, we we don't have like a God who will tell us what is right or wrong, uh, what is good and what is evil. Uh, it is that we as humans have to answer those questions ourselves, and we are fully capable of answering those questions ourselves. But yeah, there is no God who will tell us these things. There is no uh, there are no appeals to the supernatural. Um, and historically, the idea that there is no God, that there is no supernatural, was that was very uncomfortable for a lot of people. The idea that that we are just made purely of matter, and that there is that there's no immaterial soul that we have.
Yes.
A lot of people found that very distressing.
Yeah, I feel like it creates that whole interpretation of nihilism that people have where nothing
Yes,
matters. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Uh, and I think in one sense, humanism is the idea that yeah, nihilism is not the only alternative if you get rid of the idea of God.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that this is yeah, this as you say, this is particularly relevant nowadays because um, there are a lot of people working in AI who would have you believe that uh, that you are no different than the computer programs that they have built.
Hmm.
Um, uh, so, like the linguist Emily Bender described large language models as stochastic parrots, and then Sam Altman, head of OpenAI, he said, "I am a stochastic parrot, and so are you." And so, what he was saying there is that humans are incapable of creating meaning. So
Huh.
he was expressing pure nihilism. He didn't use the word nihilism, but uh, nihilism was the philosophy underlying what he said.
Yeah.
Because he's saying that humans are unable to create meaning, um, and I think that is both fundamentally incorrect and an extremely dangerous philosophy.
Yes.
Um, you know, humans are it is I mean humans are made of matter and nothing else, but we are an entirely different category of being than the large language models or any computer program. Um, you know, we are able to make choices. We can act in a moral fashion if we choose. We can act in an immoral fashion if we choose. Um, uh, People need to be aware of the fact that they are responsible for their actions, and the idea that people are no more than computer programs is, I think, a very pernicious one because
Yes.
it encourages people to think that, oh well, it doesn't really matter. I'm just sort of following my programming, or I'm just a product of my training data, or uh, uh, some other idea like that,
Yeah.
which again I think is extremely harmful, and it leads to a kind of dehumanization. It encourages people to dehumanize other people, and it can encourage people to dehumanize themselves, to think of themselves as less than they are. And so I think that this is something that we all need to resist, um, because, like I said, human beings, even
Yes.
though we are made of nothing but atoms, we are an entirely different category of being than computer programs, and we are in a category of beings that are capable of uh, actually making moral choices
Yes.
and
That
taking responsibility for our choices.
that makes me think about the quote. I forget where I heard it, but someone had mentioned that the issue with AI is that you can't hold it accountable if it makes a bad decision that harms humans. And even if human beings are just matter, we affect one another. And that is our civilization is based off how we help or harm each other. And, of course, the laws that organize that. So thank you for that. And just because I am I've been checking the time, and I know this is a rather short one. We have two more questions. I'm going to skip the fourth one, go right into the fifth, and if that's it for this, then that'll be it. But this is a fun question. After just heading off of that um, incredibly heavy topic that we just have, that is now currently at the back burner of all of our thoughts, I'm sure, which is you know that I am a film girly. I love my media, my books, my and my movies, my science fiction films. And I know that you mentioned that The Matrix might be your favorite movie. So I'm curious to know, have you seen any recent speculative fiction films that have like stuck with you or resonated with you, something in recent time, perhaps?
Um, I'm going to recommend a movie that came out last year called Mars Express. It
Okay.
is it is a animated science fiction film from France, and some people have called it's the French Ghost in the Shell, which I think is pretty. I think it's a pretty apt description.
Okay.
It is, yeah, it is not a lot of people saw it when it, came out in theaters, but I think it is a really good movie. It's a really good science fiction animated film. It's got this incredible visual imagination. Uh, you can see uh, just how much thought was put into the world building in every scene, um, and it's got a lot of um, it's got a lot of thoughts about the nature of humanity, and sort of uh, maybe the difference between being a human and being a computer program. Yeah, so I highly recommend that everyone check out Mars Express.
That's fantastic. You see, this is like you're recommending me this film. I don't care about the rest of these listeners. No, I'm kidding, of course, but that sounds great. And I did hear about the film when it came when there was like buzz about it. Never got the chance to see it, and now it's definitely gonna shoot up to the top of my list. But thank you so much for being on. Thank you for doing this for Read Magazine and San Jose State University. Um, Before we let you go, do you have any closing statements? Anything you'd like to share with the listeners, all these beautiful, handsome people who are secretly elsewhere within the rafters of technology?
Well, I'll just say Thanks, Mara, for having me on. And I look forward to meeting everyone in person when I come visit San Jose State in a little while.
This has been In the Reads, a podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. Thanks to our guest, Ted Chiang. To find out more about Ted and his work, his collections Exhalation and Stories of Your Life and Others are available wherever books are sold. And to find us online, we are located at readmagazine.org. That is read, REEDMAG.org, all one word. And thank you for listening.